Haruna Masaomi is a man in his early 60s who lives in the small countryside village of Higashikawa. His wife, Mariko, died several years prior, and the couple never had any children, leaving Masaomi on his own. Masaomi regrets not having any children, but he has made peace with his secluded life, and he's happy enough whiling away his remaining years reading murder mysteries. At least until he meets a young girl collapsed in his garden late at night during a thunderstorm. Masaomi doesn't know where the girl came from or what happened to her, but one thing is clear, she's no ordinary human. With horns like hers and long sharp claws, she can only be a monster. Ignoring the warnings of his housekeeper, Masaomi decides to take the girl in. But what will happen next? Hello and welcome, Lynx here, and we are going to be sitting to a game from ebi-hime. Unnatural Urges. Well, you more or less heard the synopsis of the game. Now we'll proceed with the game itself. Which, well, sounds like a good story, by the way. But yeah, also link in description, the game is free on itch.io. Yeah. Haruna Masaomi was dying. He lay on his back on his futon, staring with vacant eyes at the ceiling. His vision was starting to blur. It had been failing him for the last couple of years, but now everything looked vague and half-formed. His own bedroom was almost unfamiliar to him, so indistinct he might as well have been viewing it through a thick film of fog. Masaomi wasn't doing anything strenuous. He was only lying down, but it was worryingly hard for him to breathe. It felt like a wave was pressing on his chest, one which forcefully drove the air from his lungs. That sounds a little bit like... what's it called? I don't remember what it's called. Damn it. But you get the idea, like, supposedly a demon sits on your chest or something like that, and you can breathe because of that. I can't remember what it was called. Weakly, the old man gasped and hugged his emaciated body, shuddering. Masaomi was no stranger to lying on his futon, incapacitated. He had been born with a weak constitution, and he had spent much of his childhood convalescing. It had always been especially bad in the winter, so much so his parents had often worried that he might not survive until the spring thaw came. Damn! And he has to live on his own now? That's crazy. Masaomi had managed to cling to life. However, despite his parents' shared anxieties and various physicians' worst case diagnosis. Masaomi had survived more close brushes with death than most young children, but he hadn't been without consequences. Yeah, I imagine it only might have gotten his health into a worse condition, right? With every illness he fought off, his body weakened. Which in a way, I mean, it both makes sense, but it also kind of could be the other way around, right? If you fought off illness, your body would get stronger. Against it, at least. Unless it's a different case scenario, or the illness would strike much harder next time. But well, it's probably more likely in real life that you fight something off and you will be weakened. Especially like it seems like it's terminal thing. One bout of illness made Masaomi more susceptible to catching another ailment, then another. Damn. He's not catching any breaks with that. Masaomi's lungs began to give way from the force of his coughing, and his joints never quite recovered from spending so much time lying down. There had always been something wrong with his left leg, in particular. Huh? It had aged ever since he was a small boy. And before he was 20, had been bidden to use a cane to get around. Holy crap. Even now, his legs still gave him a lot of grief. It was nothing short of a miracle that Masaomi had survived for so long. His parents hadn't believed that their youngest son would live into the double digits, but had proven them wrong. Masaomi had lived to the ripe old age of 62, an age which during his childhood had seemed fantastically far away. Masaomi supposed he was fortunate that he had lived long enough to see wrinkles forming in his eyes, to see his hair turning grey, but... he didn't feel very fortunate as he lay on his futon that windy, rainy night, his body racked with pain. Every cough made him feel like he was being filleted. Masaomi's lungs were painfully tight and his throat was burning. He aged awfully and it didn't help that he could smell his own skin, his own sweat. He smelled of death. Oh boy. Yeah, that's definitely bad news. Masaomi's bedroom, where he had passed many a peaceful night, had turned to a mortuary. Masaomi groaned. Once again he coughed. Maybe not like that, but... his vision wavered, and as it did, his mind's eye retrieved a scene which had taken place a scant 3 years prior. Masaomi could still recall how his mate, Kaoruko, had stared at him, her face stricken as she cried. Seriously, oh. It's so kind of funny how mate over here is Kaoruko. And if anyone remembers, and right now I remember this because, like, one of the recent shorts, which are not very recent considering that I have not rendered any in a while. But while making them, I remembered how there was a Kaoruko in one of the games, and she was like a dorm lady, kind of similar to a maid position. It's so hilarious in a way that it's the same name for similar positions in the game. Anyway, in games, not in a game. That girl isn't human, no matter how much she might look like one. She's evil. If you let her stay here, she will destroy you. Huh? Masaomi had never seen a grown woman look so petrified before, especially a grown woman as sensible as Kaoruko. Not even Masaomi's own mother had looked so affrighted when her son had fallen ill with pneumonia for the 5th winter in a row. Aww. Kaoruko had believed in her warnings so wholeheartedly, perhaps it was a good thing she was no longer there. How so? Why? What's the reason for that? Masaomi hadn't seen Kaoruko in 3 years. Is it because... oh... because you accepted that one. Masaomi had barely seen any of the other villagers in 3 years either. Damn! They had all kept away from him, convinced that he was cursed, and maybe he was. If Kaoruko had been there, Masaomi doubted she would have shown him any sympathy. Instead, she would have said in that arch way of hers, "I told you so." Indeed. Masaomi thought vaguely she had. Kaoruko had warned him that Rinka was bad news. And yet, Rinka... Masaomi exhaled. His eyelids began to drop. Then he breathed his last, lying on his wrinkled futon in his bedroom while the red-eyed Rinka sat beside him. She stared. Her eyes bored into Masaomi's, her crimson irises a bright, brilliant red like spider lilies. She dipped her head. Nom nom nom. Then she opened her mouth and began to feed. Damn. Kind of monstrous hands, it seems like. "3 years earlier!" No way! We found the Holy Grail! A clock with indicators. I think this is only like a second time. Anyway. Goodness me! It is going down outside, isn't it? I like the old school TV as well. Yeah, and the radio, yeah. Love it. The CRT TV. The current TVs don't have the soul. Ishikawa Koruko casts her eyes up to the ceiling, her lips pressed together. Ooh, that's loud. It was early in the spring and the weather was still cool. The month of February had only just passed, and for green shoots were slowly beginning to poke up through the earth in the forest, and at the base of the nearby mountain, the days were still short, the nights long. This night in particular had felt very long indeed. The sun had begun to set a little after 6:30, bringing with it a fearsome storm which shook the tiled roof of Masaomi's home. Masaomi's mate, the cool and capable Kaoruko, had visited Masaomi earlier in the day to clean his house and to cook him a hearty meal as she often did. She hadn't banked, however, upon it starting to rain before the sun could set, nor that the rain would soon turn into a full-blown thunderstorm. Masaomi was getting on in years, but he wasn't deaf, and he could hear the thunder rumbling lowly in the distance. The air practically seemed to crackle with electricity. It was a tense night, one which practically oozed with promise. Maybe Masaomi was being a little too fanciful. He had spent much of that day immersing himself within the pages of an Edogawa Ranpo mystery. Ooh! Surprise, I'm actually familiar. And only because of Bungo Stray Dogs. But it felt like something significant was going to happen. What that something was, however, he could not say. He could only sit there and wait, sipping at the cup of green tea Kaoruko had poured for him while she tutted. Ah, green tea, so good. It all started so quickly too. There wasn't any warning. The sky was so clear earlier today. I even thought to hang out my laundry if I didn't have the time. I had to come out here. I apologize for the inconvenience I've caused you, but perhaps there is a silver lining to this. At least your laundry isn't at any risk of getting wet. That's what I was telling myself. It's a little hard to manage 2 households for, especially given... Well... Kaoruko patted her stomach. You know. Is she pregnant? Oh, congrats, Kaoruko! Also, that explains why she's not around now. Masaomi knew full well Kaoruko was in her 4th month of pregnancy and she had finally begun to show. Kaoruko's ankles had begun to swell, or so she said, almost as much as her stomach, and she was starting to get strange cravings. Simmered konbu, tangerines, fondled together, being chief among them. Masaomi had told Kaoruko she could put her duties as his housemate on hold so she could rest and recuperate, but Kaoruko hadn't been having any of it. Ah, woman. If I'm going to have the baby come the autumn, I'll need all the money I can get. Toshuki has been saving, but I'm afraid it isn't enough. I want to give my child the best start in life I can, which means I need to push myself that bit harder. Would be nice if all the, parents would be thinking that, like that, right? Besides, I'm not that far along. I can still beat your futons and make your cups of tea. Masaomi, it really isn't any trouble. That was what Kaoruko had said, at least, when Masaomi had approached the topic with her a couple of weeks prior. Masaomi was grateful that Kaoruko continued to care for him, but he could see that his cool, capable housekeeper was beginning to grow anxious. Alright, he really does have a cane for the left leg, yeah. It was late at night and the storm was still raging. It seemed unlikely that it would stop anytime soon. It might even go on all night. Masaomi lived on the outskirts of a small village in the Gifu mountains called Higashikawa. Don't know why, but like Higashikawa somehow sounds familiar. And I don't know where do I know that name from exactly. Maybe from the map. Masaomi's home was a large one, which had inherited from his parents. Oh, must be nice. After their passing. Okay, that's not the nice part. This was his childhood home, where he had convalesced as a boy, struck down by disease after disease. Yeah, that's also a terrible part. The house was an old one. It dated back to the early Meiji era, and when Masaomi had been a young boy, it hadn't possessed running water or electricity. Damn! Times had changed, however, and now Masaomi's old-fashioned home had been dragged into the 20th century. Let's go! Progress. His kitchen was outfitted with a fridge and a freezer, and he even possessed a television. We've seen. Not that Masaomi watched it very much. Someone introduced him to anime. The picture quality was poor, and in any case, he had always preferred books. He had lost himself within their pages as a youth, and he continued to turn to books even now. You know what makes sense? That makes a lot of sense. With the state of his health, yeah. Masaomi didn't have the happiest memories associated with this old creaking house, but it was also the place where he had played with his brothers, where his mother had read him stories, where his father had taught him the names of all the trees in their spacious garden. Makes me wonder if he had any work or something. I mean, how else would he be able to keep the house and so on? I'm curious what he was doing. His sprawling home might have been in an inconvenient location. It was a good 20-minute walk away from the village, but he loved it. I would love that. And he had no desire to leave. I mean, listen, 20 minutes, it's not that much, if you think about it. And also, you are kind of on your own. I like that. Like, separated. Yeah. It's like, you are separated from the crowd, but also not really, kind of thing. Given that it's so close, I like that. Masaomi could be awfully stubborn like that. He could tell that Kaoruko was getting uncomfortable, however, about how late it had become. Kaoruko's husband, Toshiyuki, would have returned home at least half an hour ago. He would be wondering where his wife had gotten off to, and why he hadn't returned home to find dinner waiting for him on the table. Kaoruko was a rather short, slender woman despite her no-nonsense attitude, and she might have feared it was unsafe for her to attempt the walk back to the village when it was so late and the storm was still raging. It was pitch black outside. There was a strike of thunder, and peals of thunder split the air as if some celestial being was routinely dropping plates from a great distance. Kaoruko wasn't afraid of the thunder. She was too sensible for that, but the muscle in her jaw did twitch every time it rumbled. Ah, so she was a little bit... maybe just a little bit... Goodness, this is inconvenient. If only I'd known the weather would take such a rotten turn, I would have brought an umbrella. I mean, I imagine there is an umbrella in the house, right? Do you really think an umbrella will protect you from this storm? It sounds much too violent. Well... Kaoruko considered the sight. No, maybe not. I'd have to wait it out regardless, but Toshiyuki will be worrying about me. He shouldn't. He should know that you're with me. You visit every single Friday. You have for almost 4 years. Damn! Kaoruko had visited Masaomi every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday without fail, never missing a visit. Dude, me, as the person I am, I would totally be against my wife going to some dude's like that. And that's because I don't trust men. Anyway, she was responsible and she was robust alongside it. Sometimes Masaomi wondered whether her immune system hadn't been forged from steel. Haruko never seemed to get sick, no matter how cold it was, no matter how tired she was, no matter how often she prepared some soothing rice porridge for Masaomi when he came down with influenza or pneumonia. Dang. Haruko had sat by Masaomi's side on numerous occasions, when he had been consigned to his futon and she had wiped his forehead free from sweat, had helped him sit up to sip at restorative rice dishes and 2 cups of green tea. Her fortitude was rather impressive. Masaomi thought that Toshiyuki should regard his capable young wife with the same respect that he did, but that didn't seem to be the case. Huh? Haruko rarely spoke about her marriage to Masaomi, but Masaomi had always had the impression that Toshiyuki didn't appreciate her enough. That son of a gun! Yeah, well, that's part of the problem. Haruko sighed, her hand resting on her stomach. Toshiyuki thinks I shouldn't spend so much time working. I think it bothers him that I spend so many hours in another man's home, cleaning and cooking for him. I understand the guy. And why should that be? He does think I have an indelicate designs upon you, does he? He thinks that everybody has indelicate designs on me, even Mr. Miyake, and he's a happily married as one can be. Yeah, I understand your husband. He's warned me not to go to the butcher's before because Mr. Miyake was kind enough to give me some pig intestines on the house. I thought he was just being nice. He said it was to celebrate the baby, and that way it was going to go bad. But Toshiyuki wasn't happy about it. He made me throw the intestines out, which seems like such a waste. Why would you throw it away for? That is rather wasteful, yeah. Masaomi frowned, now feeling rather sorry for Haruko. Not, of course, that he showed it. Haruko did not like it when anybody pitied her. She was too prideful. You should have brought those intestines over to me. I would have made short work of them. You shouldn't be having intestines at your age, Masaomi. They're bad for your teeth. Huh? If you chew too much, you'll hurt your jaw. I know, but I've not had intestines in a while. Besides, I'm not that old. You're almost 60. Ha ha ha. Which means I'm not 60 just yet. You'll be in August. You only have a few months left. You remember my birthday, Haruko? That's so kind of you. Well, of course I do. I've been working for you for 4 years. It's unnatural that I remember these things. Toshiyuki doesn't like that very much either. Is there anything that husband of yours does like? Pachinko and mahjong mostly. Ooh. That's a terrible combination. I mean, pachinko is basically gambling. That's terrible. Oh yeah, I know, you told me. Masaomi's expression darkened. If Toshiyuki dislikes his wife working for other men so much, maybe he shouldn't be so hasty to gamble of his own money away. Then you could afford to take some time off. I'm not gonna complain, but maybe you should not be talking about what you think of her husband. Just saying, man. It's a nice idea, but it's not possible right now. There are always bills to pay. And money to fritter away at the pachinko parlor? He hasn't been doing it that much lately. He stopped going to Kawano on the weekends as often as he used to. Kawano was the closest town to Higashikawa. It was more modern and contained boutique shops, chain restaurants, pachinko parlors. It was, in short, the perfect place to go if one wanted to waste a lot of money. Masaomi thought Kawano was a bit too bustling, but Toshiyuki seemed to enjoy it. He enjoyed most things, which involved frittering away large sums of money, while Haruko worked to make ends meet. Masaomi was concerned about his housekeeper, but he knew. Voicing his continued concern was pointless. He could offer advice, but Haruko wasn't obliged to take it. Masaomi wasn't her father, for he was certainly old enough for it. Yeah. All he could do was caution Kaoruko about trying to be too overbearing. Older generations were typically shunned in society as it was. Were they? For being relics of a bygone era, an era when Japan had been at war, and resources had been scarce. I mean, I'd say in the world we live in, yeah, I would never listen to older generation given how they messed up the country, the world, the, you know, financial side basically. Masaomi hardly needed to prejudice his mate against him even further by giving advice she didn't want. It was in Masaomi's nature to lecture people. He had once been a teacher, but he tried to curb this impulse. Ooh, he was a teacher, interesting! He had not taught in years, not since his health had deteriorated 4 winters prior. Ooh. That was when Kaoruko had begun to work for him. Masaomi, fearing for his own frailty, had thought it prudent to have a housekeeper to attend to the chores he could not. Conscious that Kaoruko's mood was worsening and wanted to change the subject, Masaomi began to tell Kaoruko about the book he had been reading. Oh, it really is rather good, you know. Perhaps you should give Ranpo a try. I know you like your mysteries. I used to when I was younger. You're still young, girl. But I don't have all the time in the world, not like you do. I've been so busy since I married. Does Toshiyuki not like when you read books either? It's not like he doesn't like it per se. He just thinks there are more important things I could be doing. What? Honestly, it sounds like she married a terrible guy. Like Masaomi thought, gloomily waiting on him, hand and foot. It was quite funny, really, that Toshiyuki was so opposed to Kaoruko working as a maid for the other man, when he expected her to be servile in all aspects. Yeah, he sounds like a shitty husband, to be honest. But maybe that was the real root of Toshiyuki's disdain. He wanted Kaoruko to dedicate herself fully to him. Anything else must have seemed like an act of betrayal, even if she was working to earn money for him and her baby. Masaomi spoke a little more on his novel while Kaoruko listened. Masaomi was unsure whether Kaoruko was listening out of genuine interest or mere politeness, but her shoulders began to relax. She looked marginally happier than she had when talking about Toshiyuki, at least. The conversation eventually shifted to the inclement weather and Masaomi's concerns about how his garden would fare as the rain drummed against the roof and incessant pitter-patter. It might have been cold outdoors as the storm raged on, but it was comfortable enough inside, with the brazier burning. The smell of green tea filled the air, buoyed by the whispery tendrils of steam which unfurled from their teacups. Masaomi finished his cup and had half mind to ask Kaoruko to prepare a fresh pot. She could hardly go anywhere at the moment, the weather being what it was, when he heard it. Damn! There was a cry from outdoors, one which was muffled by the walls of Masaomi's home, but which made both him and Kaoruko jump regardless. There was something visceral about the cry, something animal, but Masaomi thought it sounded unsettlingly human. It was high-pitched, high enough to split the silence, and it sent chills down Masaomi's spine. I say, what in the world was that? Could it have been the thunder? It could, I suppose, but I doubt it. That sounded like a woman to me, or perhaps a young girl. What girl would be outdoors in a weather like this for? Good question. Maybe the young Wakabayashi girl? Isn't she always getting the scrapes? She is, but not even she would sneak out her home in such an hour. The rain's been coming down for hours, and it's windy too. She gets soaked through. You're not wrong about that, I suppose. but I think I should go and check, just in case. No, you shouldn't. Karuko spoke firmly, too firmly, perhaps, for a maid to her master, but she had known Masaomi for a long time. At this point, they were more like friends than they were an employee and his employee. There is no reason for you to trouble yourself. Nobody should be outdoors in this weather, especially not you. You'll catch your death of cold. It wasn't that long ago that you had that awful flu, do you remember? I had to spend weeks nursing you back to health. I'm unsure if you would pull through, even after I asked the physician to come and tend to you. Your lungs are too weak to place any unnecessary strain on them. I don't want you getting sick again. Well, you have a point. Masaomi relented, now beginning to see the errors of his ways when he held it again, more loudly this time than the last. The sound which split the air, shattering the pleasant pitter-patter of the raindrops, was unmistakably a scream. Somebody was in Masaomi's garden, and it sounded like they were being attacked, for by what, Masaomi had no idea. He could not continue to sit idle. However, not when somebody was in trouble. Masaomi reached for his cane, which was resting by his cushion, then hauled himself upright with no small amount of difficulty. Karuko meanwhile looked whiter than porridge. Her hands were clasped at her front and she was shaking. Do you still think that was the thunder, Karuko? Masaomi glanced at Karuko, who frowned. Obviously not. It's clear something's amiss, but I wish you would sit down. I don't think it's safe out there. And what, pray tell, makes you say that? No person could have made an awful noise like that. What if it's a demon? No, that is rather fanciful. Have you seen many demons in your time, Karuko? Not with my own eyes, but I've heard stories. We do live near the mountains. People say wicked monsters live up there. Sometimes on stormy nights like this, they come to the village to wreak havoc. Maybe people believe that in the Edo era. But it's 1972, my dear Karuko. We are that far back? Haven't we as a society advanced past worrying about demons? For my part, I think it's silly to jump at shadows. These things always have logical explanations, as Edogawa Rampo says in his stories. And I would feel awful if there were a person in my garden who requires medical aid and ignored them. I think that prospect is far more frightening than your tales of weak demons. Masaomi chuckled to himself as he padded through his house, Karuko trailing behind him. She didn't look very happy about this decision, but still, she followed. She had no choice. She must have known after 4 years working with Masaomi that he was a stubborn old man who wouldn't budge. Oh, fine. On your own, headbeat. If there is some hellish monster out there, however, I won't be held responsible for what happens next. I did try to warn you. She's a cutie, by the way. I should have said that earlier. Indeed you did. The concern you have shown for me is most remarkable. You truly are an exemplary maid. And yet you still refuse to listen to me. Karuko sighed. What's the point in me worrying when you won't pay it any heed? It's enough to make you wonder why bother. I suppose we're both as stubborn as one another. Yeah, I suppose we must. Ha! How foolish. Karuko accompanied Masaomi out of the living room and into the hallway. From the hallway, with its warped wooden boards, Masaomi opened a sliding door which opened out onto the veranda. The veranda led directly out into the garden, but was sheltered from the worst of the falling rain by an overhanging roof. The roof protected Masaomi from the driving droplets which were cast down from the heavens, for there was nothing to shield him from the cold. The wind was uncomfortably cold and it blew at his hair and his sleeves. The garden was so dark it was hard for Masaomi to see more than a few feet in front of his own face. The tall Zelkova trees had been turned to shadowy silhouettes which shook fitfully in the breeze. The hedgerows, little more than dark, indistinct blobs. for there was a full moon. Kind of. Round like an egg. It was like an egg. Egg is not round. It was shrouded by clouds. The clouds were thick and dark, and they unleashed raindrops from up on high in an unrelenting salvo. The rain rattled against the roof like artillery fire. Damn. Interesting comparison. Though it was starting to pick up, it was strong enough to fall trees, to tear down fences, to pick tunnels clean from roofs and fling them across great distances like discuses. Masaomi shuddered. Perhaps Kurko had been right. It would have been for the best if he had remained indoors. He was getting on in years, and he felt the cold keenly despite the many layers he wore, and in any case had yet to locate the source of those terrible screams. Whether they had been caused by a demon, an injured person, or a wild animal, Masaomi had no idea. Masaomi was prepared to return to the comfortable warmth of his home, much to the chagrin Karuko's relief when... Oh... Masaomi saw it. One of the dark, dense rain clouds which had been blocking the moon shifted blown to one side by the breeze. The moon's light now streamed down, unimpeded, upon his garden, illuminating the shaking boughs of the zelkova trees, the leaping water in the ornamental pond, the heads of the spider lilies, which were taking a fierce beating, and the small, crumpled body of a young child. The child was lying on the ground, unmoving, face first in the dirt. Their little fingers were curled against the dirt like fossils, and their long hair fluttered around them in the breeze. The child was little more than a crumpled shape. Masaomi couldn't determine the gender from a distance, but they were so small and so slight, Masaomi wouldn't have put them at much older than 5 or 6. What? What was a child like that doing outside on such a full night? Where were their parents? Anxious thoughts raced through Masaomi's head. Flashback. Oh. Until a peal of thunder split the sky, spurring him into action. It didn't matter where the child had come from, or who their parents were. Neither did it matter that they were a complete stranger, that Masaomi had never seen them before. They were all alone, and Masaomi meant to protect them. Oh, you poor thing. Masaomi dashed forwards as quickly as his left leg would allow him, headless, or should I say heedless, of the rain which pelted him. He paused by the child's body and bent, using a considerable amount of energy. Masaomi was old enough that his joints often ached. His knees in particular liked to size up when the weather was cold like this, which made it hard for him to kneel, harder even to stand. Masaomi refused to let his own ailments get the better of him, however. He could not allow that to happen, not when a small child's health was at risk. He scooped the child against his chest using his free arm and stood, wincing all the while at the sheer effort this took. He was already panting when he had straightened himself up, and he had yet to return to the house. His heart was warmed, however, by the knowledge that he had managed to retrieve the child, that they were now nuzzled against the front of his kimono. Masaomi looked down them, at the fair, heart-shaped face, and frowned. Are you alright? Can you hear me? Masaomi addressed the child gently, for by the stir, they seemed to be unconscious. Masaomi could feel them breathing, however, against his chest he could hear the telltale stammer of their heart as he held them close. At least that was a positive. Some of Masaomi's worry left him as he examined the child, only now taking the features. Masaomi had been uncertain of the child's gender when first he had seen them, but now he thought she was probably a girl. Her long hair suggested that much. Yeah. I mean, from the features of the face, like, not even a full face yet, I can tell that's a girl, come on. Anyone would be able to tell. Ugh. She wasn't dressed as a young lady should, however, she wore a thin cotton yukata, which wasn't really appropriate for the weather, and it was spattered with mud. Oh, pointy ears. And we see another addition on the head over there. The back of the katana had been shredded, perhaps by the claws of some animal, and Masaomi thought he could see blood smeared across the down brown fabric. Had she been attacked by an animal? Masaomi was unsure. The girl's hair, meanwhile, was similarly muddy, for Masaomi could see it was uncommonly fair. Her hair was a striking golden color, like wet, and it streamed down to her waist. Was she not Japanese? Her unusual features suggested as much. She could have been a European with hair like that, but another detail about the girl's unusual appearance made Masaomi frown. Her hair, for captivating, was the most unusual aspect of her appearance. You don't say. She had horns. 2 curved appendages emerged from her scalp. They were white as milk, white as moonlight, but they turned red at the tips, the color eerily reminiscent of blood. There was also something peculiar about the girl's hands. They were dyed a similar shade of red, as they had been rooting about in entrails only a few months ago. Her nails, meanwhile, were very long and very sharp, unnaturally so. Had Kaoruko been right about this girl? Was she really a demon? Kaoruko certainly seemed to think so, because she was gripping one of the wooden joists of the veranda as if for dear life, her eyes white and her face white with horror. My God! Kaoruko gasped as Masaomi carried the motionless girl inside. Just look at her, what's wrong with her? That girl! No, that monster! She's normal! Masaomi didn't care for Kaoruko's cries, but they at least had one positive. The girl's long, fair eyelashes fluttered. Then she raised her head. Her eyes met Masaomi's, and when they did, his breath caught momentarily in his throat. He had already known that the girl was not ordinary, but her eyes confirmed his suspicions. Like the tips of her horns and like her needle-sharp claws, her eyes were bright red. They were as red as the spider lilacs which grew in clusters in Masaomi's garden, so striking that for a few moments Masaomi could do nothing but stare. Kaoruko too was stunned into silence. She gaped at the young demon girl curled up against Masaomi's chest. She shuddered. With her face twisting with horror, she drew back. Surely you don't mean to bring her inside, Masaomi? Well, what else would you have me do? Perhaps she's a demon, but she's still just a child. You don't think I should leave her in the garden and freeze to death, do you? That would be the best place for her, yeah. She might look like a child, but she isn't. Not a human child, at least. I know you've got a gentle spirit, but that's precisely why this girl, no, this creature, appeared in your garden. She must know that you're a soft touch, that's why she's come here. She's trying to take advantage of your kindness, so she can strike you when your back is turned. Do you really think so? She doesn't look capable of hurting a fly, at least not in my estimation. She's much too small, and look how much she's shaking. I know about you, but she doesn't seem dangerous to me. Of course she doesn't seem it. Cats always hide their claws before they pounce on their prey. They like to lure targets into a false sense of security. All intelligent animals know the value of pretending to be things that they aren't. She's acting like this on purpose to garner your sympathy. You can't let yourself fall for it. That girl is a human, no matter how much she might look like one. She's evil. I mean, to be fair, so are children, human children. If you let her stay here, she'll destroy you. She'll curse you and your family for generations. I mean, it's not like he has children, so it's not like there are any generations after him, if you think about it. Well, I mean, I guess he was supposedly... He supposedly had brothers, but maybe it doesn't go that way. And it's just like children of his. Anyway, and you will wish that you had listened to me. Will she now? He's sweating, kind of. Masaomi continued to examine the girl, who seemed even more afraid of Kaoruko when Kaoruko was of her. She cringed away from Kaoruko and nuzzled her down, cold cheek against the front of Masaomi's kimono. She was still shaking. What a cutie pie. Congrats, man, you have a daughter. Masaomi clicked his tongue in sympathy and then said, even if she's capable of all those vicious acts, that last one might be a bit beyond her capabilities. What do you mean? Are you underestimating her? I think you are overestimating her, my dear Kaoruko. She would be hard-pressed to curse my family for generations, given I have no children. And I don't think I have much longer left as it is. If I die in the ensuing years, it certainly won't be her fault. Oh, you know what I mean. Kaoruko scolded, her cheeks coloring in the face of Masaomi's light-hearted censures. No good can come of letting that monster stay with you. She's unnatural. Do you think so? She does look unnatural to me, putting her horns and her claws to one side. She's a living being just like you or I. I can't think of any reason to fear her. You are a fool then. Maybe I am. Faintly, Masaomi smiled. It wouldn't be the first time I've heard that, for it does sting to hear you saying that of all the people, Kaoruko. I apologize, but I'm afraid I must speak my mind. I always let you have your own way, but I will not back down this matter. If you really want to take that girl in, then I'm afraid I'll have to leave. I can't work under this roof while this monster is staying here. I refuse! Fair enough. Well now, this is a pickle. Masaomi sighed as he examined the girl. Her eyelids had fallen shut once more. Had her fatigue overcome her fear? And it looked like she was sleeping. She nuzzled her head against Masaomi's chest, seeking out his warmth. Her clothes and her hair were both waterlogged, her little body alarmingly cold. Masaomi held her close, not caring that she was getting his clothes damp. His discomfort was immaterial when compared to the girl's suffering, and it was plain, just to look at her, that she had suffered. Masaomi was not going to let her suffer even more. My apologies, Kaoruko. I've no desire to send you away like this, but you are giving me no alternative. You've been a wonderful housekeeper, and I cannot thank you enough for your service, but I'm not going to neglect a child in need for your peace of mind. This is something I simply cannot do. Forgive me, but there is nothing more to discuss. I understand this topic is upsetting you, but it's upsetting me too. I'm not prepared to become the monster you accuse this girl of being. I mean, I understand, guy. There we go. You should be nice and cozy now. Masaomi smiled at the girl, who had tucked up honest bare foot on he had arranged beside his own. Masaomi had, after bringing the girl inside, taken her to the bathroom, where he had stripped her of her garments and bathed her. He had sat the girl into the sunken wooden tub in his relatively spacious bathroom, scrubbing her pale back and soaping her long fair hair. Masaomi had wondered momentarily whether her, as fine as her, should have used different shampoos to the sort he was accustomed to. He had never seen a body with such long blonde hair before, after all. After a moment's hesitation, however, Masaomi decided that what was good enough for him was good enough for her. Correct. He had cautioned the girl, however, to close her eyes before he had dumped the bucket of water upon her head, to prevent any shampoo from getting into her eyes. Her irises might have been unusual, a bright bloody red, but Masaomi fancied they would sting just as his did, if they were irritated. By the way, but red eyes for anime characters, I love them. I don't know why. There is something about red eyes. Masaomi had handled the girl as carefully as he could, but he had been unable to quell the constant fear any wrong move would harm her, particularly given she was so skinny. The girl had appeared small in her yukata, but she had been even smaller without it. Still bearing her up, her angular shoulder blades and her concave chest exposed. She was so skinny, Masaomi had been able to see the indents of her ribs through her pale skin. There were a few cuts on her back too, wounds which seemed relatively recent because they had been dark with coagulated blood. Ooh. This made Masaomi wonder once again whether she had been attacked by some wild beast and whether that had been the cause of her screaming earlier and my tea is cold. She had sounded quite terrified, the poor thing. Masaomi still didn't know the girl's name, nor where she had come from, but he still felt for her. It was a shame that Kaoruko's illogical fear had overcome her, causing her to back away from the child as if she were cursed. But that was alright! Masaomi would have preferred it if Kaoruko were around. Should have made caring for the girl much easier, but he could get on well enough without her. Hopefully. For he and his wife had never been blessed with any of their own children. They had taken care of their nieces and nephews, all on his wife's side, in the past. Wait, could it be that his brothers also don't have children? Masaomi had a degree of confidence in his ability to look after a child, even a very small, very skinny one. Okay. He had been momentarily stopped, however, when it came to dressing her. Masaomi had lived on his own for almost a decade, ever since Mariko's unexpectedly early passing, and had no clothes which would fit somebody of such a short stature. He did not want to dress her in her old clothes, but he had little choice. He had nothing else to offer her. Still, Masaomi had tried to dry her clothes as best as he could. He had placed them by the brazier to warm up and had scrubbed off the dirt to the best of his abilities. Her clothes had certainly seen better days, but they would have to do for now. It was only a temporary measure in any case. He could look into buying new clothes for her the following morning. The following morning, however, seemed quite far away. For the present, Masaomi was content to sit by the girl, fresh-faced and a little flushed after her warm bath, as she lay on the futon. She looked up at him, her eyes white and red, her golden hair spilled across the pillow like flags. Aside from her hands being like red, there is also like... Oh, you can't see that, that's true. Give me a second. Because this one is super nice. It's custom. This is so nice. Like this kind of mark of sorts, like around the wrist area. Actually, it's longer than just wrist if you look at the other hand over here. I wonder what this is exactly about. It was still raining, but the storm had let up considerably when compared to earlier. The droplets which drummed against the tiled roof did so in a way which was almost soothing, a steady pitter patter which seemed to reassure the nameless girl. Her eyelids started to drop, and she yawned, showing a mouthful of pointed teeth which would have scared Kaoruko senseless. Masaomi remained unmoved, however, by the girl's teeth. He smiled at her indulgently, running his fingers through her hair and said, My, that was a big... My, that was a big yawn. It sounds like you're tired. Do you want to get some rest? The girl didn't respond, but Masaomi took no offense. She hadn't replied to any of Masaomi's past inquiries either, when he had been bathing her, dressing her, or when he had fed her a couple of dried persimmons from his pantry. Masaomi didn't think the girl was trying to be difficult on purpose. It seemed more likely she was shocked after everything which had happened and was too overwhelmed to speak. That or she didn't understand Japanese. It was always a possibility if, like Kaoruko claimed, she was a demon child who had come down from the mountains. Masaomi didn't know what language demons spoke amongst themselves, but he doubted they would share a common language with the humans who lived at the base of the mountains. Why would they? Communicating with the girl might pose some difficulties, but Masaomi wasn't one to give up. He smiled at the girl indulgently as he said, Well, never mind. You can sleep for as long as you want. You look like you could use it. I won't rouse you, not until you're fully rested. Please make yourself as comfortable as possible. And if you need anything in the night, don't hesitate to wake me up. I'll be sleeping here, right next to you, so I can get you something to drink or accompany you to the bathroom. That's a weird thing to say. Don't worry about disturbing you. Even if I'm fast asleep, just give me a poke and I'll wake up. I don't need to be up for anything myself tomorrow morning, so we can both sleep in if we need to. Doesn't that sound nice? The girl remained mute, quietly observing Masaomi beneath her sweep of long, pale eyelashes. She seemed a bit hesitant, her eyes wide like a startled woodland animal's. Despite her horns and her claws, she reminded Masaomi a little bit of a rabbit. Rabbit? One of the wild ones he sometimes saw scampering about in the woods. What? Why? Masaomi smiled at this thought and gave her head another ruffle. Well, I'll leave it to it, little one. Sleep well if you can. Since the storms died down a bit, it should be easier to get some rest. I think the sound of falling rain is quite soothing myself. I know where you came from or how you found yourself in my garden, but I won't question it. That's not important right now. I just want you to be comfortable. You'll be in safe hands with me, I promise. Masaomi continued to survey the girl, something akin to fatherly compassion welling up inside his chest. He was feeling rather tired himself. The night's events had weighed upon him and he wanted to go to bed, but something about the girl's eyes held him captive. He continued to kneel by her side, stroking her hair in an attempt to soothe her when... The girl blinked shyly. Then, in a very quiet voice, one which almost melted in the faint sound of the falling rain, she said, Will you really look after me? The girl's voice was very quiet, perhaps from lack of use, and it stuttered more when the melody played from an aged music box. Her Japanese was proficient enough, Masaomi could understand her at least, but the girl's insecurity was evident not just in her face, but in the way she tripped over her words. She sounded utterly lost, so small and sad that Masaomi couldn't help but pity her. He smiled, touched that she was making an effort to communicate, and said, Of course, I'll look after you. I wouldn't have brought you indoors if I didn't mean to. I'd be an awful man if I let a young child like you catch her death out in the cold. You say that, but most humans would leave me. You think that I'm evil? The woman you were with, I don't think she liked me very much. Well, maybe you have a point. Masaomi sighed. He would have liked to tell the girl that everything would be fine. That of course the people of Higashikawa would warn to her if only they gave her a chance, but he didn't want to lie to her. That would have felt disrespectful. Karuko's always been a bit flighty. She puts a lot of stock in superstitions. I'd like to say she's the only person you'll meet like that, but I'm afraid I can't. I would be surprised if other people in the village took against you because of your appearance. But I won't. You mean it? I promise. Cross my heart and hope to die. Masaomi chuckled lightly when he last made a promise like this, and stroked the girl's cheek. Her cheek was flushed. Was she feverish? But Masaomi hoped her temperature would calm down in time. Now she was indoors, safe and sound. The girl looked at Masaomi, blinking sluggishly, perhaps trying to discern it, in her own childlike way, whether he was telling the truth. She stared and she stared, as if she meant to bore a hole through his skull. But her sleepiness overtook her, and she yawned, her red eyes squeezing shut. Tears began to bed upon her lashes, and Masaomi smiled. I'll let you get some rest. You look like you could use it. I don't want to keep you up, but there is something I would like to know. Do you have a name? The girl opened her mouth. Closed it. She frowned, her expression unreadable. She was crossing her dainty features, which, for a few moments, made her look almost foreboding. Before her brow creased apologetically, she shook her head. Masaomi was unsure whether he believed her. The demons Masaomi had heard about in folktales all possessed names, even the fearsome Shutenduji. I already know the name because of fate, but maybe there was a reason she didn't want to share it. Her clan. The demons live in clans? Might have forbidden her to share her name with humans. That or perhaps her true name was too complicated for an ordinary human to pronounce. Whatever the case, however, this was quite the country. Masaomi needed some way to address her, so... Would you mind if I gave you a name then? You can do that? If you wouldn't mind, I can hardly keep calling you or girl. That would be very rude. Everybody needs a name. Even monsters? Even monsters, yes. Do you have any preferences? No. I don't really know what humans are called. It's complicated. Alright, can I name you myself then? If it's not too much trouble. It's not trouble at all. You know, my wife and I did always want to have children, but we were never blessed. I actually know someone who couldn't have offsprings for a very, very long time. And they finally got one in their late 50s. Not really the greatest age to have a child, obviously, because, you know, the older you get, the more possibilities for the child to be sickly and so on, but... Well, maybe it will turn okay, right? Anywho, I'm unsure whether it was a medical matter or if we're simply unlucky. But we did talk a lot about what we would call our children if we've ever had one, any. There was one name my wife was particularly fond of. She might not be around anymore, but I'm sure she'd be smiling up in heaven if one little girl was able to use it. What do you think about the name Rinka? Well, I don't know what she thinks about it, but I know with her getting a name, we are going to end the episode. We'll continue tomorrow. That is correct. This is, I think, that game which is not like one episode long. So, yeah, we'll continue tomorrow. And we'll see where this all is going. For now, hope you enjoyed. Consider liking the video, subscribe if you're new around, and so on. As I mentioned, the game link in the description is free. You can go and play it yourself as well. Or you can go and check out some other games from ebi-hime. There has been a ton of great stories over there. Yeah. With that being said, hope you have a wonderful day. And feel free to join me tomorrow too. Bye bye.